Hi everyone, my name is Angela Ochieng. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I'm also the founder and visionary of Sharia Clinic. A little bit about Sharia Clinic. It's an online Kenyan legal aid firm that was started in 2021. You provide pro bono legal services, and we also enhance the participation of young lawyers through equipping them with practical skills. A side note is that we won the Legal Journalism Awards for exhibiting exemplary dedication and consistency towards advancement of bold and ethical journalism in 2023. Now, today I'm not alone. I am joined by a very well-able counsel. Her name is Venessa Sifunjo. Karibu Sada.
Thank you.
So I'll just go ahead and read out her profile for you to know that we actually care about the people we bring on board. They're very serious people, by the way. So a little bit of her profile. She's an associate at Oraro and Company Advocates. She currently serves as a committee member of the Data Protection and AI Committee at Embellish Network. She's the current partnerships manager for Consortium for Women in STEM Empowerment. She's served as a board vice chair for Jijenge Youth Organization. She has also served as a legal officer for JKUAT Legal Clinic. She has served as a legal officer for FIDA. She has also served as a campus ambassador for International Model United Nations Association. The fun part is this. She's an alumnus of JKUAT School of Law, where I was also a student. She's also an alumnus of Bishop Katimu Gandu High School Girls. About her licenses and certifications, she has a couple. Apart from her degree, madam. She has a couple. So she, apart from doing the LLB and also other things, she has done the following. Around 7. You'll be impressed. She's done Data Privacy and Protection Masterclass. She has done the AI Career Essentials course. She has done a masterclass in taxation. She's very good at numbers, it seems. She has done mediation at Mediation Training Institute of East Africa. And related to that, she's also done mediation under CAL Mediation and Arbitration Center. So it means she's a certified professional mediator, apart from being an advocate at the High Court of Kenya. She has also been a conference delegate for KMUN, that is Kenya Model United Nations, and she has been a Taifa Teule Fellow. So probably she can do a bit of intro before we start the question. Anything else you'd like to add?
I think I have nothing more to add.
Nothing more.
Yeah.
We'll start now. Few questions about data protection. The topic is on data protection. So anything and everything that entails data protection. So first off, what is data protection? And probably you can tell us why does it matter?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Angie. I think I do have some background in data protection, and I can give a few insights as to what it is and what it entails. So when you hear data protection, it's basically the process of safeguarding private information, sensitive information, and that could mean information that is specific to you. So identifiable information, so your name, your address, your phone number, your email address, anything that I can use to identify you, that is your data. And protecting it now means putting in safeguards to ensure it is not lost, it is not altered, it is not disclosed without your consent, and that generally you give consent as to how it's going to be processed. It is important because you do not want your data to be disclosed to just anybody. It would have great repercussions for you as an individual, professionally, socially. You do not want your address just out there in the age of femicide, in the age of, theft. You want your data safeguarded. So it is important in that aspect as well.
When you talk about data protection, I'm thinking about the health status. And I think you've seen a case about a person who was probably HIV positive, and then their data was disclosed unknowingly or unwillingly. Yes. Their employer. What would you have to say about that?
I mean, it's a popular case. If you went to law school, you probably know the case. But I feel like if you look at the facts of that case, it's so damning to think that you'd walk into work one day and everyone knows your health status. And on top of that, your employer is going to leverage on that to like fire you or like deny you certain rights under the Employment Act, like maternity leave. Like it is not something that anyone would wish even on their worst enemy. So I love that particular ratio because the court was very clear when it comes to such sensitive data, because like your health status is a sensitive data under the act. So I do feel like it should be safeguarded, and courts should come in and enforce the provisions of that act, and employers should know which data to disclose, which data to keep private.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Probably you can tell us about the legal framework governing data protection in Kenya, in Africa, world.
Yeah. So thanks, Angie. So Kenya, we jumped into the bandwagon very recently, like as early as 2019. That's when we have our act. We have the Data Protection Act 2019. On top of that, we have been trying to go around, coming up with regulations to support that act. So we currently have general regulations under that act. We also have regulations on complaints and handling procedure and enforcement. So if you're aggrieved, maybe your data has been leaked or your data has been disclosed, you do have an avenue for that. We also have, though not passed, we have regulations, draft regulations around audit, compliance, and that kind of stuff. So in terms of Kenya, we have the grand norm. Of course, we have the Constitution, which is very heavy on your right to privacy under the Bill of Rights. And then now we have supporting legislation. So the Act, the Data Protection Act, and the regulations they're under. That's in our local jurisdiction. We do also have in the African context, we've also jumped onto it. So we have the Malabo Convention, just trying to harmonize the laws in the region for member states. And we also have what we've borrowed so much from the GDPR, which is the EU. It's an EU-based convention, regulation. Yeah.
Who's a data subject? Am I a data subject? Are you a data subject? And what are our rights?
Yeah, you are a data subject. I am a data subject. Data subject is basically anyone with identifiable information. So your name, your address, as I said, your health status. By virtue of having that identifiable information, you qualify as a data subject. And as a data subject, the Data Protection Act 2019 is very pro you. It's very pro data subject. And then you have certain rights under that act. So, for example, if you go to a hospital and you give your data, of course, you're going to fill out, let's say you have insurance, you're being covered by insurance. You're usually given a form and you put in your details and that kind of good stuff. So, when I do put in my details in that form, before I even do anything, I have the right to be informed what that data is going to be used to do. Like, it's not just a blind and giving you my data. Even if you go to these buildings in CBD and kuna like this what should I call them? Like guards, then ask you fill in like a book. Before you fill in that book, because like they want your ID. Sometimes I'm like, you want my name, my ID, my status, and I'm just going to make my hair. Like, what are you going to use as information?
Should we sell that data?
So I have a right to ask you as the guard, like, why do you want this data? What is it going to be used for? Then if you decide, okay, you're going to tell me what this data is going to be used for, I have a right to, after I put in my data, I have a right to access that data. So if I'm
going to the rights,
yeah,
you're talking about
the rights now. So the right, first of all, to be informed, what is this data going to be used for? Why am I giving you my ID and I'm going to make my hair? What are you going to use that information? So I have a right to ask you what you're going to use that information to do. So as a data subject who has identifiable information, you have a right to ask, this data that I'm giving you, what use are you going to put it to, right? And in the event that I do give you that data, let's say I do fill in my details and the like, I do have a right to access that data. Like, you can't say, okay, now you've given us the information, you stay right there. I have a right to access that information. And in any event, let's say, for instance, I feel like the data I entered is inaccurate, or even if it was at the time accurate, it's currently not reflective of the current position, then I have a right, let's say a phone number. We change phone numbers every now and then. I have a right to rectify that particular data or that particular information. Again, you still do have a right to refuse to give out your data or to refuse that this data be processed in a particular way. And in any event, you do have a right to erasure. Like, you do have a right to demand, not even request, demand that your data be deleted. So, for example, I usually make a joke with my colleagues, and I'm like, if you do send out like your CV, let's say you're job hunting, you send out your CV, and some employers or prospective employers, they don't get back to you. They don't even tell you you make it to the interview process or stage. You can write back and say, I've been waiting this long and I do feel like I submitted very sensitive information. You should erase that particular information from your data set. So you do have rights to that, like right to demand that your erasure be complied with. Plus, the ODPC has been very active. There's actually a case where the ODPC fined a bank for taking too long to erase data from their system. So yeah, you have those rights as a data subject.
Thinking of children,
Yeah.
you say data subjects can be any of.
Yeah.
Probably you can tell us about children and whether they're actually part of data subjects and do they enjoy those rights? Will their parents enjoy those rights on behalf?
I mean, children are vulnerable. They are vulnerable, right? They are protected very vehemently under the Constitution. They're just a special set because they even have like their own special governing law, like the Children's Act. They're treated specially in the criminal justice system. So the same way under the data protection regime, children are guarded jealously. Like their data is guarded jealously. They are subjects because a child has a name from birth. A child has identifiable information, their face. You can identify them from their face. So, and the special thing about them is that they're under 18. A child is anyone under the age of 18 years. They cannot consent. They cannot consent in anything, right? So there's no way you're going to put it up as a defense. I posted a photo of a child and the parents actually sue. Sometimes I've come across cases where schools, like some schools have used the children's pictures to market the school itself. And parents have actually gone ahead and sued that school. And actually the DPC has determined that these schools never got the requisite consent from the parents to do whatever they did. And they've been fined heavily because for issues involving display of pictures, advertisements and the like, the DPC has been very strict in issuing compensation. They issue up to $1 million with a cap of $5 million, So that would ordinarily tell you that children are very special data subjects. And for you to process any kind of data that touches on a child, you need to obtain consent. Now, they cannot consent. Who do you now go to? You need to ensure that their parents give explicit consent. I'm not talking about implied. I talked to you about your child and I thought you said it's okay. Like in any event, you should strive to make sure that you have it documented. Let them sign a consent form or something like that. With the few NGOs I've got to work with, you find that you work a lot with children. Let's say if you're an NGO that gives back a lot, you work with orphanages, children homes, and the like. Or sometimes you want to do an awareness that touches on children and you want to invite children from a particular, let's say, area. For you to be able to sit down with those children, educate them on whatever you want, you need to actually ensure that their parents are in the know. How do you ensure that their parents are in the know? By ensuring that you get consent from their parents. How do you get consent from their parents? Get your consent forms, comply with what the law has to say, get that in writing so that you avert any kind of consequences in case you're sued.
Thank you. You mentioned ODPC. Maybe our viewers are wondering what offices that. Maybe you can tell us about the ODPC and the role it has in Kenya and safeguarding data protection.
Yeah. So I think I went over myself. ODPC in full is the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. It's established under the Act, and it is primarily established to ensure that we all comply with what the law has to say about data protection. It is also established to sort of just oversee if you're doing the wrong thing in terms of that space. And that means that they're the ones handling complaints. So if I feel like my rights have been violated, it's a statutory remedy that has been presented to us as a first stop. So that's why you go and put in your complaints. They're going to investigate the matter, then come up with the determination, and in their discretion, either issue an enforcement notice. That's a notice that is telling you, rectify this, comply with this, do. For instance, now I know like they do a lot of, they tell a lot of like companies to give them like a roadmap on on a gap. So they identify a gap. You guys are processing data, but you're not, for example, you don't have consent forms. So they're like, comply with this, give us a roadmap on when you're going to come up with the consent forms and how you're going to ensure that now you incorporate that into your systems. So they can issue those enforcement notices. If you do not comply, they can go ahead and penalize you. So they give penalty notices after that fact. They can also give compensation. Like, they've been very generous to data subjects. You find you get very unsolicited messages, someone promoting something. You're like, I never gave my number to this person. And you go ahead and you lodge a complaint to the office, then you'd find that they are very, if you can prove your case, they are very generous in like giving you compensation. And it doesn't have to mean that you suffered financial harm. It could even be emotional distress. You know, why are you texting me at 12 a.m.? 10 texts zikifuatana, you know, that kind of stuff. So they look at those factors and they can issue that as well. They can also issue administrative fines of a cap of up to 5 million. So they've been very effective in terms of ensuring that data subjects are like their rights are upheld and observed. Yeah, that's what the office does.
I think there's a case that comes to my mind, and it's already out there in the public domain. There's a launch somewhere, I think, called Casavera. Probably you can talk about the photos and all that. It's already the public domain. So
Yeah,
no problem.
I mean, for the longest time, if you went out, not just clubs, I mean, even in events, you'd find that they have photographers on the ground and your photos are taken, and somehow you find yourself on their Instagram page or on their website, and you're like, I didn't consent to this. I don't know what is going on here. So like for the longest time, they used to use the excuse that, you know, before you enter into the club or before you come into the event, we have a notice or like sort of a write-up that notifies you that photographs are going to be taken in this event. And they used to like piggyback on that to just say that you, by virtue of entering that club, despite that notice, you've consented. But like after a lot of back and forth, I think the position currently is that consent, you cannot imply consent. You cannot say that because you saw that disclaimer that we're going to take photos here, you've consented. Consent has to be expressly gotten. It has to be informed, and in any event, it has to be documented. If you're going to get consent from me, make sure I sign that consent form. And in any event, currently even the office is very specific. You see the way you go to like a hospital, for example, and you're given a consent form, and it's just like the terms are like, I consent to my data being used like that. And it's never I, Angela, or I, Vanessa, consent. Like the office has been very specific by saying that even in those forms, you still have to be specific. I may have signed a consent form, but my name is not there. It's just saying I consent to my data being used in this particular way. But it's not I, Sifunjo Venessa, then consent. Because you see, in any agreement, we have a very vital part of the agreement called the parties. So who is parties to this particular consent? It's very generic, you know. So if not just be specific, don't just rely on a notice, have something down, but it's also be specific and specify who this data subject giving you this consent is. Yeah.
Probably you can go to the distinction between a data processor and a data controller. Maybe you can tell us who are they, and can someone be a data controller and data processor at the same time?
Yeah.
And you can give us also examples.
Yeah. I think we can start by understanding the difference between a controller and a processor. So just from the word controller, derive the word control. So a data controller, you control how that data is used. So you're the one coming up with the guidelines, the standards, the procedures. You're the one coming up with the policies. You're the one directing and determining how this data is going to be used, why this data is being used, so the purpose of this data, right? So like most organizations, they come up with, a good example is a data protection policy. So in that policy, they are going to direct how the data they collect, depending on what they do, is going to be used. By virtue of that, giving that particular direction, you are controlling how that data is going to be used. A processor is now the person who takes that data, they now use it, puts it into use. And use could be whichever form you choose to, or whichever way you choose to put that data into practical use. For example, if you're it's like in our profession, if you're like a law firm, if your client's name, that is data. So how you're gonna use it is, let's say in court matters, you're gonna name them as a plaintiff or as a defendant, right? So the person that puts that data into you, so the advocates in that firm, that's a data processor. If you're having a filing system, perhaps like most companies, organizations have an archive system where they have physical files and they file them away. Judiciary has an archive, they file them away. But like with technology, like most organizations are embracing cloud storage. And now that cloud storage is usually a third party. It's like you outsource company X to store your firm data in their cloud storage. So by virtue of that storage is processing of data. So by virtue of that storage, that company that is storing this data in their iCloud management system, that is a data processor. So that's a major difference. And you can be a data processor and a data controller at the same time. Yeah.
Maybe you can tell us then the obligations for each.
Yeah, I mean, in every setting, mostly your obligation is to ensure that if you are processing this data, you're collecting it, you're using it, you're storing it. Sometimes you're even transferring this data, whether within the jurisdiction of Kenya or even cross-border, like outside. Your major obligation is to ensure that you adhere to what the law has to say. So you adhere to the fact that data processing has principles. It has, for instance, if you're taking data, you have to take data just enough to do what you want to do. So data limitation. You just can't go around, like I was telling you the example of the guards. You can't be asking me for my marital status and I'm going to make my hair. Like, where's the connection? So you have to limit the data that you collect to the purpose to which you want to use it. Again, purpose limitation. If you're collecting data and you said, Venessa Sifunjo, you've come to this hospital, you're going to use your data to diagnose your illness. Limit it to that. Like beyond, after you do that, delete that data or like store it for a particular period of time depending on the guidelines of your profession and erase that data. If you go beyond that, you're breaching my rights, right? Again, legality. Ensure that, and transparency, that this data that you're processing, in whichever way you choose to process it, make sure it's legal. Don't give my data out to the black market, for example, to human traffickers, for instance. That is illegal. So make sure that you're processing my data in line with what the law has to say. And transparency, ensure that I am aware the means by which you're processing my data, why you're doing it, to who else, if it's a third party. Usually when you download an app like TikTok and you have like that click wrap agreement where most of us just accept here. But it's always good to go back and read, because see, with click wraps, you cannot download that app before you accept terms and conditions. And then you won't come and cry foul and say, I didn't know. Now your TikTok is suddenly recommending everything you talked about during the day with your colleagues. You're like, I talked about this. It's now on my SYP, on my For You page. You see, by virtue of downloading that and entering into that click wrap agreement, you've given consent for your data to be used. So you just have to ensure that you are aware that this data is going to be used in this particular way and to this extent. So controllers and processors come in that way. Just ensure that every single data set that you put into use, that you collect, that you store, that you transfer, even that you delete at the end of the life cycle, everything that you do, ensure you confine it within what the law has to say. Yeah.
Very impressive, and you really expanded on that. There's a thing called big data. Please tell us what is big data and what's the correlation with AI and all that.
Big data and the Internet of Things. I think big data it ruptured in the age of, I think around 2020 thereabout, when we were all in lockdown and suddenly our phones now became like our best friends and we were sharing so much data on the internet. Guys who've never been on Instagram suddenly had Instagram pages. So you see, big data is just exactly what it sounds like. It's big data. It's data sets that are massive, collected from various sources. So like before the internet blew up, we did used to have data, but like its accessibility was a bit limited. But like with the internet, which is now like a global village, so much data is now on the internet that is now used to train things like artificial intelligence, like AI. So big data is just like a vast amount of data that is obtained from different sources. Could be the internet, could be social media, could even be from physical, documents. So that's what big data is. And AI, on the other hand, AI is basically a system that mimics human intelligence. And most of us like use ChatGPT and that kind of stuff. So that it's like it leverages on machine learning to train this model to act like a human being, to think like a human being, to answer questions like a human being would. And they relate now, big data and AI, they relate because big data is what is used to train AI. Your AI output is as good as the data you input. At some point, everyone was like grappling with the fact that most of what ChatGPT would give you as an answer was very Western based. It had no bearing on African traditions and African cultures. It would give you an answer as if you were in the West, and if you'd put in, let's say, something along the lines of your cultural identification, your traditions, it would struggle to give you, it would hallucinate, not give you like accurate answers. Even as lawyers, you'd find it gives you a Kenyan, for English case laws, it would give you accurate case law, even from House of Lords, from King's Bench. But you come down and you're looking for a Kenyan case, and it's gonna quote Lillian S., the jurisdiction case, in a different issue. It would hallucinate a lot. And that is because AI systems, the output it gives you, the answer it gives you is just as good as what you fed it. So for the longest time, AI systems have been trained on big data that are westernized, right? And now we want to come to train these systems on more Afrocentric data. Like we want to put in, if you want, as Africans, if you want an answer or an output that is relatable to us, to our struggles, to our systems, to our traditions, then we have to feed in data that aligns with that. So big data uses AI. Big data is what is used to train the AI systems.
How does that now relate to data protection?
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Recently, I think in Tanzania, there's a man that sued ChatGPT, OpenAI, and said that in the process of using that tool, he keyed in questions about himself. So, who is Venessa Sifunjo? ChatGPT told him everything about Venessa Sifunjo, where she stays, what she does for a living, even where she works. Yeah. So he was shocked and perturbed that this system knew almost everything about him, but at no point did he feed this system this data. So sometimes you find that big data, or just data in general, data sets are fed into AI to train AI systems. Then in the process, you breach someone's data rights. Let's say, even like you're doing your research and you unmistakably enter in like your client's name on that particular machine or that particular application. You key in, you don't anonymize it and say, imagine it's client X, and then you put in your fax. You go and say, this client, and you mention your client with this PO box that is now in this particular situation. Advise me. So you see, when you are entering this data, and when most of these companies that train AI enter this data, in that data, you find that there's personal data that is identifiable to someone. And you're doing this without their consent. And now, their data now forms part of the archives or part of the information this tool now uses to give output to various people who don't even know the subject.
I'll stop you then. I'm thinking of apps like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Probably you put some data there, maybe where you work or where you school, especially in scene.
Yes.
And now the AI will use that to answer maybe a stranger out there.
Yeah.
So how are these companies, probably you play the devil's advocate here, how are these companies using their systems to protect data? Because if I use, for instance, any AI, just give me an example, and I put my, probably, what if I want to spy on my boyfriend or something, and then I'm able to see everything. So play the devil's advocate, tell me what like Facebook can do, what it's doing, Instagram, anything.
Yeah.
As a data controller and processor.
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, Instagram, before you create your profile and everything, it makes you consent. The click-wrap agreements I was talking about, their defense is always that click-wrap agreement, because there is no way on earth you're gonna sign up for Facebook and you haven't said, I accept the terms and conditions. What are the terms and conditions gonna say? They have a clause on data protection, and they have a clause saying how they're going to be using your data. And most of them say sometimes your data may be given to third parties.
Third party is the AI.
Third parties is anyone that's not part of the agreement. So you, let's say an app X, you are downloading the app. When you send that click-wrap agreement, it's between the app and you. Anyone else, like a ChatGPT, like an AI tool, getting that information is a third party. Exactly. So most of them are like, but you said, yeah, I accept these terms and conditions, and you went ahead and you did your profile and you set up everything. So most of them have that agreement in place. I think most companies, most firms, most multinationals, most apps are now taking data protection very seriously, and they're ensuring that the agreements you are entering in with them have a clause on that. So that's number one, how they protect themselves. Okay. And they protect any interaction with your data to third parties, right? So that is just one way. I mean, and then the long short of it is, the thing with these AI tools is that they scrape the internet for your data as well. So sometimes it's not Facebook or Instagram that has given you your data. In the process of these companies that train them, in the process of them training this particular AI tools, they use a scraping method and somehow put your data in on the internet. Now, the person now is going to be liable is this company. And that's why most data subjects are going direct and suing most of these companies that train AI. Because, like, explain to us, one principle is transparency. Yeah. Can you explain to me how you train your systems? ChatGPT is like this smart tool that knows everything. But, like, can you explain to us how you make it know everything? What's that procedure? How do you input data? Where do you get this data that you're inputting? Who gives you that data? Have subjects consented that data? So you're using such vast amounts of big data. You need to explain to us how you're able to get consent from all these data subjects. What strategies did you use? Most of them don't give us that. There's no transparency. So it brings a whole issue like around data protection. Yeah.
Right. I have another question regarding AI.
Yeah.
So what are the key privacy concerns with AI and big data that you just talked about?
Yeah. I mean, I'll just give you a practical example. AI and big data mesh in terms of or in light of surveillance. For example, I'm talking CCTV footage, facial recognitions, biometrics. So the key concerns there would be breach around that would bear very, very grave consequences. If an unauthorized person was to access your biometrics or your facial recognition, they could very easily use that to your detriment, to conduct fraud, to conduct or to like commit crimes and the like, to even forge documents when it comes to your biometrics. Sometimes even it goes as far as your safety. If someone is able to access surveillance and identify that, Angela, this is your building, this is where you live, then what would that mean for your safety? What would that mean for you?
It is.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes big data is used in AI systems like chatbots. And let's say for an example of a bank that has a chatbot that asks you questions before it gives you a loan. And you'd answer questions depending on your individual circumstance. But as a woman in the African setting, right, that chatbot could easily misinterpret that data and now turn it against that population. So there's now what would be perceived as prejudicial information. So that now bots are trained to think women can't take loans up to this limit. Because this one woman who made a chat with this bot only could manage a loan up to 100,000. And so it creates biases in the community. If an AI system uses big data to shortlist candidates in maybe a job interview or in an employment setting, that is automated decision making. And it's actually in the act, it says such decisions should not just be based on AI systems. There should be human intervention. Why? Because it's very easy for these AI systems to now be biased against a certain population. Like I know in the Americas, the Latin people really struggled with biases that AI offer. So that now most of them don't get shortlisted because of their history or because of their identification, because they're Black or something like that. So those are kind of the risks that may come in when AI and big data mesh.
Still on AI, I would want the viewers to know and understand what legal protections are there that exist to regulate AI with regards to personal data in Kenya, in your country.
Yeah. I think just emphasis on the current legislation, right? And we do also have a few AI policies that are coming up. Everyone is now concerned about, AI data protection. So we do have a standalone regime for data protection, but like most scholars, it's subject to debate. Most scholars, most legal professionals feel like it's not robust in handling AI as well because it's majorly centric on data protection. Some think it's okay, we just need to incorporate it and we don't need like a sui generis system for AI alone. So it's subject to debate, but whichever way you choose to think of it, we do have the current legislations, the current regulations, the current policies around AI. They're striving to ensure that kind of compliance when it comes to data protection. That's in Kenya, right? And the constitution as well. It's like the ground norm. If it says privacy, it cuts across. Even if an AI, the internet suddenly is now all over. It's now raging, and now we have AI. It would still apply. We have the Cyber Crimes and Computer Misuse Act. That it does not say AI specifically, but AI is in the internet. It's like burst out of a lot of use, Internet of Things, a lot of use of the internet. So that by that virtue in and of itself, the cyber crimes can still regulate offenses that may fall, under misuse or unethical use of AI. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Now, in terms of compliance, how can businesses, organizations ensure compliance with Kenya data protection? Because I think it's a big thing.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a business and you're handling data, I don't think there's a business that does not handle data on a day-to-day basis. Just please ensure, for your sake, hire a DPO, a data protection officer. Right now, the certifications, people are taking courses to become DPOs, and you leverage on that because they are more hands-on, they're more aware about what is required by the law, what is required when it comes to compliance, so they'll really come through for you. Again, if you're going to onboard or if you're going to leverage on existing AI systems or applications, ensure you do a risk assessment. So a data protection risk assessment, it's very important just to exactly. Impact assessment.
An EIA?
Yeah, it's like the equivalent of NEMA's EIA, like the environmental impact assessment. It would give you an idea of the merits and demerits of this application. Like, would it be far more worse to employ this AI in terms of its implications on data subjects, right? Or is it just okay? It does have some risks, but the benefits outweigh the risks. You have to do that comparison before you make any corporate decision to like employ or to onboard any AI service. And just overly ensure that you do a lot of sensitization. If you are an employer, you probably have several employees or a few. Doesn't really matter. Just ensure that they know as they're handling and processing that data, there are some do's and some don'ts when it comes to data protection. And I think with that, you'll have a good head start. Yeah.
Probably now you can tell us what your takeaway is from this full discourse on data protection.
Yeah. So I think my takeaway would be that data protection or data privacy, it's the new currency, and it must be, mandatorily, it must be safeguarded with unwavering diligence. That will be my takeaway.
What good takeaway? I can't even add anything from that. Anyway, probably now give you time to maybe tell people something about yourself and how they can reach you if they want to reach you.
First, I'd like to thank you for having me on your platform, Sharia Clinic. I think you're doing a really good job. So thank you for this discussion. You can reach me through my LinkedIn, Venessa Sifunjo, and we can pick up any conversations from there.
And we have a little surprise for you.
Oh my God. How nice. Okay. A nice shirt.
So this is a shirt written Sharia Clinic. That's our logo.
Cute.
And then our mantra, or
Let's serving your legal insights.
serving you legal insights
In the simplest of ways.
So this goes to you. Thank you for
Thank you so much.
great conversation. I have learned a lot. I really love it, but big data and AI and all that I have learned about. I'm so grateful. And with that, that's the end of our session for data protection. And see us on the next one. Thank you. Goodbye.